In the heart of the misty mountains lay the hidden valley of Arafane, a place of beauty, mystery, and whispered tales of transformation. It was said that those who entered its serene embrace could find answers to the struggles that weighed them down. For Ehsan, a once proud craftsman now burdened by failure and despair, this valley was his last hope. What he didn't know was that his journey to Arafane would uncover a forgotten prayer, test his faith, and lead him to a destiny he could never have imagined. This is the story of how a single act of trust, a heartfelt supplication, and unwavering determination can turn even the darkest path into one of light. So, prepare to be inspired by Ehsan's remarkable journey, a tale of renewal, resilience, and the extraordinary power of sincere faith. The mountain paths leading to Arafine were narrow and treacherous, winding through jagged cliffs and dense mist that seemed to cling to the air. Ehsan had traveled these paths for days, his feet aching with each step, and his heart weighed down by the burdens of failure. He carried a small satchel of brass ornaments, the last remnants of his once thriving trade. Each item in the bag reminded him of what he had lost: his reputation, his wealth, and his sense of purpose. The mist around him felt like a mirror of his own despair, thick and impenetrable, obscuring the path ahead. As Ehsan climbed higher, he heard the distant sound of water cascading down the cliffs, a soft, melodious echo that grew louder with each step. Finally, he reached the edge of Arafane, and the sight before him took his breath away. The valley stretched out like an untouched paradise, its lush meadows shimmering with morning dew. A crystal-clear stream wove through the grass, reflecting the golden light of the rising sun. Towering trees framed the valley, their branches swaying gently in the cool breeze. It was a scene so serene, it almost made him forget the heaviness in his heart. Despite the beauty surrounding him, Ehsan felt out of place. He watched as other travelers moved through the valley with ease, their faces serene and their steps unburdened. Merchants set up colorful stalls in the marketplace, their goods arranged neatly on woven cloths, while families rested under the shade of ancient trees. Laughter and the hum of conversations filled the air, a stark contrast to the silence Ehsan had carried within him. He tightened his grip on his satchel, wondering if he could ever feel the peace these people seemed to possess. Ehsan found a spot near the stream and sat down, the cool grass beneath him offering some comfort after his long journey. He opened his satchel and carefully removed a small brass lamp, its intricate designs catching the sunlight. Once these ornaments had been a source of pride, proof of his skill and creativity. Now they felt like relics of a life he could barely recognize. As he ran his fingers over the engraved patterns, a wave of sadness washed over him. What use is beauty, he thought, when it brings no fortune? The sound of the stream was soothing, but it did little to quiet the turmoil in Ehsan's mind. He stared at his reflection in the water, his face gaunt and his eyes shadowed by exhaustion. Memories of his past haunted him, the bustling workshop he had once owned, the admiration of customers who marveled at his creations, and the joy of crafting something with his own hands. Those moments now felt like distant dreams, eclipsed by the reality of his struggles. "Ya Allah," he whispered, his voice trembling, "why have you left me to wander like this?" As the day went on, Ehsan noticed more travelers arriving in Arafane. Some came with joyful expressions, their hands full of goods to trade, while others looked weary like him, their burdens evident in their slow steps. Yet, even the weary seemed to find solace here, their faces softening as they took in the valley's tranquility. Ehsan envied their ability to let go, to breathe deeply and embrace the peace that Arafane seemed to offer. He wondered if he could ever do the same, or if his worries would always tether him to despair. Nearby, a group of children played by the stream, their laughter ringing out like music. They splashed in the water and chased each other across the meadows, their joy unrestrained. Ehsan watched them with a mix of longing and bitterness. They don't know what it means to fail, he thought, to work tirelessly and still fall short. Yet, as he observed their carefree movements, a small part of him wished he could recapture that sense of lightness, the ability to exist in the moment without being weighed down by fear. As the sun began to set, the valley transformed under the golden light, its beauty becoming even more surreal. The shadows of the mountains stretched long across the meadows, and the stream sparkled like liquid gold. Ehsan felt a pang of guilt for his bitterness, knowing that the valley's serenity deserved more appreciation than he had given it. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill his lungs. For a brief moment, he felt something stir within him, a flicker of hope, faint but undeniable. Perhaps, he thought, this valley held more than just beauty. Perhaps it held answers. By nightfall, the valley glowed softly under the light of a crescent moon. Lanterns dotted the marketplace, their warm light casting shadows on the ground. Ehsan remained by the stream, his satchel resting beside him, and stared at the star-filled sky. The sound of the waterfalls in the distance blended with the rustling of leaves, creating a melody that seemed to calm even the most restless of souls. Yet Ehsan's heart remained heavy, his doubts as persistent as the mist that lingered in the valley. He whispered another prayer, his voice low and uncertain. Ya Allah, if there is a path for me, show it to me. I don't know how much longer I can walk alone. As the first rays of dawn broke over the valley of Arafat, Ehsan woke to the gentle rustle of leaves and the murmuring stream beside him. The cool morning air carried the scent of wildflowers, a reminder of the valley's serenity. Determined to make something of the day, he gathered his small collection of brass ornaments and made his way to the bustling marketplace. Merchants were already setting up their stalls, their goods ranging from woven tapestries to shimmering jewelry. Ehsan found a quiet corner at the edge of the market, spreading out his wares on a simple cloth. Despite the lively atmosphere around him, doubt clouded his heart as he wondered if anyone would notice his work. Hours passed, and while other stalls bustled with activity, Ehsan's corner remained quiet. Travelers walked by, occasionally glancing at his wares but never stopping. He watched as merchants nearby bartered enthusiastically, their laughter and conversation filling the air. Frustration began to creep in, mingling with his lingering despair. He clenched his fists, the faint hope he had felt the night before slipping away. "What am I doing wrong?" he muttered under his breath, his gaze fixed on the brass lamp in his hands. "Is this valley's promise not meant for someone like me?" Just as Ehsan was about to pack up his wares, an elderly woman appeared before his stall. She was unassuming, her simple robes blending into the crowd, but there was a quiet grace about her that made Ehsan pause. She picked up one of his ornaments, a small brass bracelet adorned with intricate engravings, and examined it closely. "This is beautiful work," she said, her voice calm and kind. "You have a gift, young man." Ehsan looked up, startled by her words. "Thank you," he replied hesitantly, unsure if she was merely being polite. The woman set the bracelet down gently and met his eyes. "Tell me," she asked, "why do you carry such doubt in your heart?" Ehsan was taken aback by the directness of her question. He hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "I've worked hard," he finally said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But it feels as though no matter what I do, I can't succeed. My prayers go unanswered, and my efforts lead nowhere." The woman nodded thoughtfully, as if she had heard these words before. "It's not uncommon to feel that way," she said. "But have you considered that perhaps the problem isn't your efforts, but the connection you've lost?" Ehsan frowned, confused by her response. "What do you mean?" he asked. The woman smiled gently. "Sometimes, when our prayers feel unanswered, it's because we've forgotten how to truly call upon Allah." The woman reached into a small pouch tied at her waist and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. "This," she said, holding it out to Ehsan, "is a prayer that was given to me when I felt as lost as you do now. It reminded me of my purpose and brought me clarity when I thought all was lost. Recite it with sincerity, and you may find the answers you seek." Ehsan took the parchment with trembling hands, unfolding it carefully. The words were written in elegant script, their simplicity striking. "Ya Allah, you are my refuge, my guide, and my provider. Grant me patience in adversity, trust in your wisdom, and strength to walk the path you have chosen for me." As Ehsan read the prayer, he felt a strange warmth spreading through him. The words resonated deeply, as though they had been written specifically for him. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice filled with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. The woman nodded, her gaze steady. "Remember," she said, "prayers are not just words. They are a bridge, connecting your heart to Allah's wisdom. But a bridge is only strong if built with trust." Ehsan stared at the parchment, the weight of her words settling over him. He wanted to believe her, but years of disappointment made it hard to let go of his doubt. Before Ehsan could ask more, the woman turned and began walking away, her figure disappearing into the crowd. He watched her leave, a sense of urgency bubbling within him. "Wait!" he called out, standing abruptly. But she was gone, leaving behind only the parchment and the echo of her words. Ehsan sat back down, his thoughts racing. Who was she, and why had she chosen to speak to him? The prayer felt like a lifeline, but he wasn't sure if he had the strength to grasp it. For a moment, he considered discarding it, the weight of his doubt almost too much to bear. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in hues of orange and gold, Ehsan remained at his stall, the parchment clutched tightly in his hands. The marketplace quieted, and merchants began packing up their goods, their laughter and chatter fading into the distance. Ehsan gazed at the words on the parchment, his heart caught between hope and fear. He folded it carefully and slipped it into his satchel, resolving to try the prayer that night. "Perhaps this is the sign I've been waiting for," he thought, though a part of him still hesitated to believe. Yet, as the valley grew darker, the memory of the woman's kind eyes and steady voice lingered, a small spark of light in his shadowed heart. That evening, as the stars emerged one by one in the clear sky above Arafat, Ehsan sat alone by the stream. The parchment rested in his lap, its edges illuminated by the soft glow of a lantern nearby. The valley was quieter now, the bustle of the marketplace replaced by the gentle sounds of rustling leaves and flowing water. Ehsan stared at the words on the parchment, his heart heavy with both hope and hesitation. "What if this changes nothing?" he thought. "What if I am too far gone for even a prayer to help?" Yet a small part of him held on, urging him to try. He unfolded the parchment and began reciting the prayer, his voice low but steady. "Ya Allah, you are my refuge, my guide, and my provider." As he spoke, the weight of the words began to sink in. They felt different from the rushed prayers he had whispered in desperation before. These words carried a depth and clarity that resonated deeply within him. For the first time in years, Ehsan allowed himself to be vulnerable, laying bare his fears and doubts before Allah. His voice wavered as he repeated the prayer, his emotions bubbling to the surface. Tears began to stream down his face as the words flowed from his lips. Ehsan had always thought of himself as strong, someone who could endure hardship without complaint. But now he realized that strength wasn't about carrying burdens alone. It was about trusting in Allah to help lighten them. Each repetition of the prayer felt like a step closer to something he had long forgotten, the feeling of being heard, of being cared for. The valley around him seemed to respond to his supplication, its stillness wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. The stars above sparkled brightly, their light reflecting in the stream like 1,000 tiny lanterns. Ehsan's surroundings seemed to fade away as he focused solely on his connection with Allah. He prayed not for wealth or immediate solutions, but for patience, clarity and strength to walk the path that lay ahead. Ya Allah, he whispered, his voice trembling, I don't know what the future holds, but I place my trust in you. With those words, a sense of calm began to settle over him, easing the storm that had raged in his heart for so long. When Ehsan finally finished the prayer, he sat in silence, his hands resting on his knees and his eyes closed. The night air was cool against his tear-streaked face, and for the first time in what felt like forever, his mind was quiet. He didn't have answers, nor did he know what the next day would bring, but he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. It was a fragile feeling, like a spark waiting to catch fire, but it was there, glowing faintly within him. The sound of the stream grew louder in the stillness, its gentle flow echoing in Ehsan's ears like a soothing melody. He opened his eyes and looked at his reflection in the water. His face, though weary, seemed different now, softer, lighter, as though a part of the burden he carried had been lifted. He reached into his satchel and carefully placed the parchment beside his remaining brass ornaments. This, he thought, is worth more than anything I've ever owned. As the night deepened, Ehsan lay back on the soft grass, gazing up at the vast expanse of stars above him. The crescent moon hung low on the horizon, its light casting a gentle glow over the valley. Ehsan's heart felt tender, raw from the emotions he had released, but there was a sense of peace in that vulnerability. He whispered a quiet thank you to Allah before closing his eyes, letting the sounds of Arafine lull him into a deep, restful sleep. The next morning, Ehsan awoke to the golden light of dawn streaming through the trees. The valley was alive with activity as travelers prepared for the day ahead, but Ehsan remained still, savoring the calm that lingered from the night before. He reached into his satchel and pulled out the parchment, reading the prayer once more. The words felt even more powerful in the light of day, their meaning clearer than ever. He stood and gazed at the valley around him, the beauty of Arafine now filling him with inspiration rather than envy. For the first time in years, he felt ready to take the next step. The golden light of dawn bathed the valley of Arafine, painting the meadows in shades of green and gold. Ehsan stood at the edge of the stream, the prayer parchment tucked safely in his satchel. His heart, though still burdened by uncertainty, felt lighter than it had in weeks. The words of the prayer echoed in his mind, like a melody that refused to fade. Determined to take a step forward, he made his way to the marketplace, clutching his small collection of brass ornaments. Today, he decided, he would approach his work with trust, not in his circumstances, but in Allah's wisdom. The marketplace buzzed with activity as merchants displayed their goods on colorful cloths and travelers bartered enthusiastically. Ehsan found a corner near a large tree and set out his wares, arranging them carefully to catch the morning light. His hands lingered on a small brass lamp, its intricate patterns a reminder of the pride he once felt in his craft. As he adjusted its position, a traveler paused at his stall, their curious eyes drawn to the ornament. "This is beautiful," the traveler remarked, picking up the lamp. "Did you make this yourself?" Ehsan nodded, his voice steady but unsure. "Yes," he replied. "It's one of my creations." The traveler examined the lamp closely, their fingers tracing the delicate engravings. "It's exquisite," they said, handing Ehsan a small pouch of coins. "I'll take it." Ehsan stared at the pouch, disbelief washing over him. It wasn't a grand sale, but it was the first he had made in weeks. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice filled with gratitude. As the traveler walked away, Ehsan clutched the pouch tightly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. It was a small victory, but it felt like a door beginning to open. As the day went on, more travelers stopped by Ehsan's stall, drawn by the intricate beauty of his ornaments. A merchant purchased a brass bracelet, admiring its craftsmanship, while a young boy convinced his father to buy a tiny engraved pendant. Each sale, though modest, chipped away at the doubt that had shadowed Ehsan's heart. For the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of pride in his work, his hands steady as he exchanged coins and blessings with his customers. By midday, Ehsan's satchel felt noticeably lighter, the number of unsold ornaments dwindling. He sat back beneath the shade of the tree, his eyes scanning the bustling marketplace. The hum of conversations and the laughter of children filled the air, blending with the gentle rustle of leaves. Ehsan realized that he was no longer envying the peace of others. He was beginning to feel it within himself. The prayer he had recited the night before lingered in his mind, each word a reminder of the trust he was rebuilding in Allah. Among his customers was an elderly merchant with a keen eye for detail. The man picked up a brass trinket and turned it over in his hands, inspecting it with a practiced gaze. "You have a talent, young man," the merchant said, setting the trinket down. "Why do you hide yourself in the corner of the market? Your work deserves more attention." Ehsan hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "I wasn't sure if anyone would value it," he admitted. The merchant chuckled, shaking his head. "Value is created by belief," he said. "If you believe in your craft, others will too." The merchant's words struck a chord in Ehsan's heart. He realized that his hesitation and self-doubt had been as much a barrier as his misfortunes. The prayer had begun to chip away at those doubts, and now the encouragement of others was reinforcing that fragile belief. As the day drew to a close, Ehsan packed up his stall, his pouch of coins heavier than it had been in months. He looked around the marketplace, the setting sun casting long shadows over the valley, and felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the sales he had made. That evening, Ehsan returned to his spot by the stream, the sounds of the valley growing quieter as night fell. He pulled out the parchment and read the prayer once more, his voice steady and filled with gratitude. "Ya Allah," he whispered, "thank you for reminding me to trust in you. I see now that even the smallest blessings carry your wisdom." He folded the parchment carefully, placing it back into his satchel, and stared at the stars reflected in the stream. The glimmer of hope he had felt the night before had grown brighter, like a spark igniting into a small flame. As Ehsan drifted off to sleep under the canopy of stars, he thought about the day's events, the sales he had made, the kind words of the merchant, and the sense of purpose that was slowly returning to him. It wasn't just the marketplace that had changed, it was his own heart. The prayer had opened a door, not just to success, but to the trust and clarity he had been searching for all along. And with that trust, he felt ready to face whatever the next day would bring. The following morning, Ehsan awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The cool air of Arafat filled his lungs as the valley buzzed with activity. Encouraged by the small victories of the previous day, he decided to expand his stall in the marketplace. He rearranged his remaining brass ornaments with more care, setting them on a raised wooden board he had borrowed from a neighboring merchant. As travelers began to pass by, he greeted them with a smile that was no longer forced. Hope had begun to settle into his heart like a steady flame, fed by his faith and trust in Allah. Around mid-morning, the elderly woman who had given him the prayer appeared again, this time weaving a colorful tapestry under a nearby tree. Her loom clicked rhythmically as her hands moved deftly across the threads, creating intricate patterns that seemed to tell a story of their own. Ehsan felt a pull toward her, sensing that her quiet presence held more wisdom than he could grasp. He approached her slowly, holding one of his brass lamps in his hands. "Assalamu alaikum," he said softly. "Your weaving is beautiful. How do you create something so intricate and perfect?" The woman looked up, her eyes warm but sharp. "Wa alaikum assalam," she replied with a smile. "Weaving is like life, young man. Each thread represents a moment, a decision, or an experience. When woven together with patience and intention, even the mistakes become part of the greater design." Ehsan nodded, her words resonating deeply. "I think I understand," he said. "Your prayer has helped me trust in the path I am walking, even if I don't fully see where it leads." The woman paused her weaving and studied him carefully. "That is good to hear," she said. "But remember, trust is not a passive thing. It is an active force that requires courage and effort. Tell me, what are you doing to move forward?" Ehsan hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "I am trying to sell my work," he said, "and I am praying, just as you taught me." The woman nodded slowly but didn't respond, her silence pressing him to reflect further. He realized that while his efforts had increased, he still carried a fear of taking bigger risks. Just then, a commotion broke out in the marketplace. A large caravan of wealthy merchants had arrived, their horses adorned with silver bridles and their goods displayed in ornate chests. Among them was a man dressed in luxurious robes, his sharp eyes scanning the stalls as his attendants followed closely behind. He exuded authority, his every gesture commanding attention. The marketplace grew quiet as he stopped near Ehsan's stall, his gaze falling on the brass ornaments. Ehsan's heart raced as the man picked up a lamp and turned it over in his hands. "Who made this?" he asked, his voice firm. "I did," Ehsan replied, his voice steady despite his nerves. The man studied him for a moment before speaking. "Your work is exceptional," he said. "I am preparing gifts for a royal delegation and would like to commission a large order of these lamps. Can you fulfill it?" Ehsan's breath caught in his throat. The opportunity was enormous, but so was the challenge. He had neither the materials nor the time to create such a large order. I will try my best," he said, his words faltering. The man frowned slightly, but nodded. "See that you do," he said before moving on. As the caravan disappeared into the distance, Ehsan felt both exhilaration and dread. The commission could change his fortunes forever, but it also required resources he didn't have. He sank to the ground beside his stall, his mind racing with doubts. "Ya Allah," he whispered, clutching the prayer parchment. "You have opened a door for me, but I am afraid I cannot walk through it. What should I do?" His heart felt heavy, the weight of his fear threatening to extinguish the hope he had so carefully nurtured. The elderly woman appeared beside him again, her presence as calm as ever. "You seem troubled," she said, though it was clear she already knew why. Ehsan looked up at her, his face filled with worry. "The opportunity I have prayed for is here," he said, "but I don't have the means to seize it. What if I fail?" The woman sat beside him, her hands resting on her lap. "Failure is not the opposite of success," she said. "It is part of the journey. You asked Allah for guidance, and He has given it to you. Now it is up to you to act with trust." Ehsan took a deep breath, her words sinking in. He realized that his fear was not of the task itself, but of disappointing others. and himself. He stood slowly, determination flickering in his eyes. "I will try," he said firmly. The woman smiled, her gaze filled with pride. "Good," she said. "Remember, trust and effort go hand in hand. Let your work be your prayer, and Allah will guide you through the rest." As Ehsan began to pack up his stall, he noticed something strange. Beneath his satchel was a small bundle of materials he didn't remember placing there. Polished brass sheets, carving tools, and a pouch of coins. He turned to the woman, his heart pounding. "Did you—" he began, but she was gone, her loom and tapestry nowhere in sight. Ehsan stood frozen, a sense of wonder and awe washing over him. He looked toward the horizon, the mist of Arafine shimmering in the distance. "Subhanallah," he whispered, his doubts melting away. With renewed faith, he picked up the bundle and headed toward his workshop, ready to begin. Ehsan returned to his temporary workshop in Arafine, the bundle of unexpected materials resting securely in his arms. His mind swirled with thoughts of the elderly woman and the mysterious way the tools and coins had appeared. Though he couldn't explain it, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "Ya Allah," he whispered as he unpacked the bundle, "you have shown me a way forward. Help me honor this opportunity and trust in your guidance." The night stretched on as Ehsan worked tirelessly, his hands moving with purpose and precision. The brass sheets gleamed under the lantern light, their beauty slowly unfolding into intricate lamps, each more detailed than the last. He recited the prayer softly as he worked, its words becoming a rhythm that steadied his hands and strengthened his heart. The tools felt familiar in his grip, as if they were an extension of his will. For the first time in months, he didn't feel overwhelmed or afraid. He felt aligned with his purpose. By the time the sun rose, Ehsan had completed the first set of lamps. He stood back to admire them, their polished surfaces catching the morning light and casting delicate patterns on the walls. Exhausted but fulfilled, he sat by the window of his workshop, watching the valley awaken. Merchants and travelers began to stir, their chatter and laughter carrying on the cool morning breeze. For the first time, Ehsan felt at peace, not because his struggles were over, but because he trusted the path he was walking. As the days passed, Ehsan worked relentlessly, pouring his heart into every lamp he crafted. News of his commissions spread through the marketplace, drawing curious travelers to his stall. Some came to admire his work, while others offered words of encouragement. "Your lamps are truly remarkable," one merchant said. "It's no wonder the caravan chose you for such an important task." Each word of praise fueled Ehsan's determination, reminding him that his craft was not only a means of livelihood, but also a way to bring beauty into the world. On the final day before the caravan's return, Ehsan carefully packed the completed lamps into crates lined with soft fabric. The set was stunning, each piece a testament to his skill and resilience. As he tightened the last cord, he felt a mix of relief and anticipation. He had poured everything he had into this work, and now it was ready to be delivered. That evening he sat by the stream and recited the prayer once more, his voice steady and filled with gratitude. "Ya Allah," he said, "I have done my best. The rest is in your hands." When the caravan arrived the next morning, the wealthy merchant from before inspected the lamps with a discerning eye. Ehsan watched nervously, his heart pounding with each passing moment. Finally, the man turned to him, a rare smile gracing his face. "These are extraordinary," he said. "You have exceeded my expectations." He handed Ehsan a heavy pouch of coins, far more than the agreed payment, and clasped his shoulder firmly. "You are not just a craftsman, you are an artist. If ever you wish to expand your trade, my doors will always be open to you." Ehsan's hands shook as he accepted the pouch, his eyes filling with tears. The weight of his efforts, the prayers, and the trust he had placed in Allah all culminated in this moment. The marketplace erupted into cheers as the other merchants congratulated him, their faces filled with pride and joy. It was more than just a personal victory. It was a testament to the power of faith and resilience. In the days that followed, Ehsan used the earnings not only to rebuild his trade, but to help others in need. He donated to struggling merchants, offered free repairs to travelers, and shared his story with anyone willing to listen. The prayer that had transformed his life became a beacon of hope for others, spreading through Arafat like the gentle ripple of the valley's streams. Trust in Allah, he would say, and act with sincerity. The rest will fall into place. Months later, as Ehsan prepared to leave Arafat and return to his hometown, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The valley had given him more than a second chance. It had given him a renewed sense of purpose and faith. Before departing, he returned to the stream where he had first recited the prayer. The parchment, now worn but cherished, rested in his hands. He whispered the words one final time, his heart brimming with gratitude. As Ehsan walked away from Arafat, the valley's mist seemed to part, revealing a clear path ahead. His satchel was filled not just with tools and wares, but with the lessons he had learned. The road stretched before him, uncertain yet full of promise. And with each step he took, he carried the light of Arafat in his heart, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Ehsan's journey through Arafat reminds us all that faith and effort go hand in hand. When we trust in Allah and take sincere action, even the most daunting challenges can lead to remarkable outcomes. His story teaches us that failure is not the end. It's often the beginning of a greater plan, one that unfolds through patience and prayer. Remember, Allah's doors are always open, waiting for us to knock with sincerity. Let this story inspire you to recite your own heartfelt prayers and take steps forward with trust in His guidance. Your journey may hold struggles, but it also holds infinite possibilities. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.